Hello everyone, and welcome back to AmourologyEd, where we do sex and alternative lifestyle education. My name is Krista, I'm your host. Today we're going to be talking about asexuality. So yay, I'm so excited about this one. As a kind of side tangent to this one, we are going to be in this video also talking about the idea of different spectrums of romantic attraction as well, because it kind of goes hand in hand with sexual attraction in that they're different. Yay! Also, I did interview somebody for this video. However, this was back when I was taking my hiatus and I was having a lot of video issues that I didn't realize I was having until I went to do the editing process. And so therefore, the video is not going to be useful. However, I am going to release that interview as a podcast-only edition later this week. So, if you are not listening to the podcast, yay, you should find it. It's AmourologyEd, Sex and Alternative Lifestyle Education. If you just search AmourologyEd wherever podcasts are found, you should be able to find it. And subscribe to that, because otherwise you will miss the fabulous interview that I did. And yay, it's going to be great. So this person goes into all sorts of detail about their life as an asexual. So yay, do that. Asexuality is an umbrella term used to describe somebody who has little or no sexual attraction to anybody else. And it doesn't have to be the opposite gender. They can still have a gender or sexual identity in addition to being asexual, or ace as it's sometimes referred to. This is a kind of interesting one because it's relatively new in the research that is being done on it, and the research is actually kind of flawed in a lot of places. So they've done studies in mostly North America and the United Kingdom that seem to indicate that about 1% of the population identifies as asexual. Now, identifying as asexual is kind of a weird term because it's such a new concept that a lot of people don't realize that it's a thing and that they maybe are asexual and so therefore don't identify as asexual. And there's also a lot of people that maybe are asexual and know about it that just don't identify as asexual, and that's okay too. These studies are also not very repeatable. So they've done multiple of these studies and gotten various different mixed results. The general consensus is that roughly around 1% of the population maybe is asexual. It is probably more than that, just because people don't know about this. And a lot of the studies that were done, a large percent, like 30% of the people that they asked to fill out this census declined. So you're not really getting a good idea of the general population and what they actually think. So it's kind of strange, but it is more common than you think, which is really the point that I want to drive home. I think the part about this that confuses a lot of people is this idea that sexual attraction and romantic attraction are two very different things and need to be separated when referring to them. So there is sexual attraction where you desire to have some sort of intimacy with somebody. And I say intimacy because there are other forms of intimacy other than sex, right? So when we talk about sexual attraction, we're really just meaning actual sexual attraction. When we talk about romantic attraction, that can mean so many different things. So romantic attraction is desiring a romantic relationship with somebody. There's also things like aesthetic attraction, so being attracted to someone based on how they look, but not necessarily wanting to have sex with them. There's sensual or physical attraction, so wanting that sensual, physical, touching relationship, that doesn't necessarily mean sexual. There's platonic attraction, there's wanting to be friends with someone, and then there's just kind of emotional attraction, which is what we kind of generally consider when we talk about romantic attraction is feeling emotionally connected to someone else. The kicker here is that asexuality is different than aromantic. And so people will oftentimes refer to themselves as one or the other or both, just to kind of give a more in-tune idea of what they are looking for. So asexuality means that I am not interested or have little interest in sex. Aromantic means I have no or little interest in a romantic relationship, which includes all of these various different things. The main point of this, though, is that relationships can be completely and totally healthy without a sexual connection or a sexual aspect in the relationship. And that is totally and completely valid. I mentioned this before, but I also want to touch on the fact that asexuality is different than a sexual orientation. For instance, I identify as demi-pansexual. We'll get into what the demi means because it's kind of under that umbrella term of the asexuality, but pansexual is my sexual orientation. If you've watched my last videos, you know what that means. If not, go back and watch it because it's great. There's also this idea that you can be an asexual lesbian, or you can refer to yourself as more the romantic side, so an aromantic queer. Those are all very different things, and people will oftentimes like tack on this ace or a or whatever into what they are actually sexually oriented or not. Here is the thing that confuses most people about asexuality, and the question that I get most often is that asexual people sometimes have sex, sometimes masturbate, have romantic relationships, have relationships where sex is involved. And this is confusing for people because if you don't experience sexual attraction, why do you want to have sex? Why is that a thing? Okay, there are so many different reasons for people to have sex. There are so many. So reasons for people to have sex are to satisfy their libido. Yes, asexual people may still have a libido. That's okay. To conceive children. Asexual people may still have children, may want that, may want a family life. To make their partner happy. Relationships are sometimes a compromise, and asexual people, as long as they're not, say, sexually repulsed, and we'll get into what that means as well, may still want to please their partner and may still enjoy that aspect of it. To experience the physical pleasure of sex. Maybe they're curious. Maybe it still feels good. And this is so complicated, I know, because if you don't have sexual desire or attraction, can it still feel good? Yes, it can. To show or receive affection. For sensual pleasure of sex, including touching and cuddling. Again, sensuality doesn't have to mean sex. And maybe someone just craves that every once in a while. Out of curiosity. And then, of course, some asexual people have little or no sex drive or sexual desire and don't have sex. And that's totally okay too. Again, all of these things are valid and it means so many different things to different people. So, short story is, yes, asexual people can still have sex, masturbate, and have relationships and enjoy all of it. So there is a difference between libido, sexual desire, and sexual attraction. So libido is your sex drive, and it's the wanting to experience having sexual pleasure. Asexual people may still experience this. I've definitely talked to a lot of people who are asexual that just kind of feel the need to masturbate every once in a while because they still have a libido and it still is a release for them in various different ways. And so libido can be separate from being asexual. Sexual desire is the desire to have sex, whether it's for pleasure, a personal connection, conception, or anything else. And then sexual attraction involves finding someone sexually appealing and wanting to have sex with them. this is where the heart of asexuality lies. So asexual people may still feel sexual desire and may still have a libido, but they don't really have sexual attraction, or they have little sexual attraction. We'll get into, again, this is an umbrella term, it's a spectrum, like everything else. On the other hand, there are plenty of asexual people that don't have a libido and don't have sexual desire and therefore don't have sex. And that's all part of that spectrum. There's also this thing called sexually repulsed, which is where kind of what it sounds is this idea of sex is kind of repulsive to you. Just the various aspects that go into sex are not only not engaging and don't seem desirable, but you actively dislike that. And that's just another one of this spectrum of asexual, where there are people that just are kind of grossed out by sex. Again, it is possible for those people to actually have sex though. So it's really just all in the exploration that somebody is willing and wanting to take at any given moment on their journey. We're going to get into what asexuality is not here. We've talked a little bit about what asexuality is. Asexuality is not a disorder. It's not genetic. It's not a result of trauma or caused by anything else. So somebody who has had maybe, say, a sexual trauma and their libido has dropped and they don't want to have sex with somebody anymore or anybody anymore, is probably not actually asexual. They probably have some trauma that they need to work through, and I highly recommend going to a therapist for that type of thing. But in general, if you felt kind of a drop in your libido for various different reasons, whether it be medication, trauma, whatever, you're probably not in that asexual spectrum. Or maybe you are and you're just figuring that out, and maybe you just have been kind of fooling yourself into thinking you had this sexual attraction when you didn't, because that's the norm and we all try to conform to the norm. Also, asexuality is not a fear of intimacy. There are plenty of asexual people who have very intimate relationships and are very happy with that. It's not celibacy or abstinence. So abstinence is about deciding to not have sex, and celibacy, and is usually temporary. Celibacy is about deciding to abstain from sex and possibly marriage. This could be for religious, cultural, personal reasons. It's often a lifelong commitment, but it's still not asexuality. Asexuality is an asexual person is somebody who cannot or does not experience a sexual attraction very often. So remember how I mentioned several times that asexuality is an umbrella term? Well, there are lots of different terms that go underneath the term asexuality that someone may or may not identify with for various different reasons. I'm going to just go through a couple of those so you have some terminology to refer to if you decide to try to talk intelligently about this subject. So, demisexual, we referred to earlier as part of my own sexuality. Demisexual are people who only experience sexual attraction once they form a strong emotional connection with another person. So you really have to get to know someone before you can form a sexual attraction. So for instance, I can aesthetically appreciate the way that someone looks like and think that they're pretty, but I may not want to have sex with them until I get to know them. For me, it's really interesting, and I can speak for my personal experience here. This isn't a generalization because different people experience in different ways. But for me, I know once I get to know that person's physical features actually change for me. They actually become more attractive and I want to have sex with them. Whereas I literally can't experience sexual attraction to someone before I know them. I just can't. There's also gray sexual or gray A. These people rarely experience sexual attraction, or they experience it with a very low intensity. So remember how I was saying it was a spectrum? And so some asexual people may actually experience sexual attraction occasionally or at a lower intensity than what they would consider normal. So gray sexuality also includes things like gray romantic, demi-romantic, demisexual, or semi-sexual. These are all terms that kind of mean similar things that all kind of fall under the sub-umbrella of gray sexual. But in general, these are people who identify somewhere between the sexual and asexual spectrum. There's also Queerplatonic, so people who experience a type of non-romantic relationship where there is an intense emotional connection that goes beyond a traditional friendship. So this is like an intense emotional connection that you don't really feel like is just a friend, but you don't really have sexual attraction to this person either. So Queerplatonic is kind of a term that you can use to describe this. On the other side of this coin is kind of this idea of the different romantic types. So romantic and sexual are different things. And so you can have a demisexual aromantic, or you can have an asexual romantic person. So there's aromantic, which is people who experience little or no romantic attraction and are content with close friendships and other type of relationships. And that's, again, totally valid. Anything that really has a sexual aspect also probably has a romantic aspect. So, again, demisexual, demi-romantic, asexual, aromantic, bisexual, biromantic, heterosexual, heteromantic, homosexual, homo-romantic. You get the idea. It goes on and on and on. And they can be separate things. So you can have someone who is heterosexual, biromantic. That's okay. Okay, folks, that's all I have for today. Be sure to tune in for the podcast only edition coming up. Probably this Friday is when I'm going to release it. I don't know what date that is because I'm bad at that. That's going to be February 21st. So tune in for that on the podcast and get lots more information about this from a person who identifies as asexual, and kind of find out what it's like maybe figuring that out and how one figures that out about themselves and what it's like living that, and answer some more questions that kind of go beyond the basics of what I covered in this video. As always, you can find me at AmourologyEd. You can find me on all social media at AmourologyEd. You can join my Facebook group at AmourologyEd as well and talk about even more of this stuff or get some more questions answered. It's a great community and very open, and I just adore them. You can also... what else? Patreon. You can subscribe to my Patreon at AmourologyEd. You can like and subscribe this video. You can like and subscribe the podcast. There are so many options if you want more information. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know. Thank you so much, everyone.